Hello and welcome to Filbert Flies and this first ever live lesson in the working title Cessna Citation CJ4. Now I'm joined today by Matt, one of the devs on the working title project, who's very kindly given up a little bit of time to teach me how to fly the thing properly. So hello Matt and welcome.
Hello, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for being here. So just before we get going and start setting up the aircraft, would you mind telling us a little bit about the working title project and how you got involved with it?
Yeah, you know, it's a funny story. So I have been simming for many years. I think my first flight sim was Flight Sim 4, way back in the day on my 486.
Right.
And yeah. And so as MSFS was kind of starting to come out, I was doing some AvSim posting as one does, and one of an old friend of mine sort of got in touch with me and said, "Hey, you know, are you the same? Are you the same Matt that I remember from you know, a few years back? We have a shared friend." And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Hey, I know you do a little bit of programming, right? Do you want to, you know, the CJ4 in the game it's a little bit sketchy. It's not fantastic, right?" So you know, he said, "Are you interested in maybe modding that a little bit?" And at first I went, "Oh gosh, it's, you know, it's one of these folks that they're gonna want kind of programmer time for free. You know, it's you get a lot of those requests in the mod community, and I've been involved in a few game communities and sim communities in the past, and you get a lot of that. But the collaboration was fantastic, and so we started working on it. I think it was October, November,
Right,
just a little bit after the sim launched.
Yeah.
And it just really grew from there. And we ended up getting hooked up with a former pilot of the CJ4. He now flies the E175. Another simmer from Germany also works with us. He has sort of pioneered a lot of the dev experience, the debugging side of things early on that just it wasn't available any other way, and so he pioneered a lot of that and decided to join up with us too. And we've got another person who's actually lives relatively close to where I am, so it's an interesting crew. It's very cool, and we've got you know, we probably have easily 1,000+ hours in the CJ4 and probably a good 300 or 400 in the Garmin at this point. So it's been definitely a labor of love, but we're very proud of where we've gotten with it.
And rightly so, It flies well.
Thank you.
It's probably the best of the modded aircraft in the sim, I would say. It's certainly the most full-featured, and yeah, it's great fun to fly. So what's your role within the team? What aspects of it have you worked on?
A lot of different things, actually. So I'm a programmer by trade. I've been in the IT business for a long time. You know, right now I do kind of financial programming. Big systems. I'm on the architecture side at this point, kind of having moved up from the development side. So I'm used to having to really get in the guts of things and reverse engineer them and, you know, make them work a little bit better. And so some of the big pieces that I've worked on are like the custom flight manager.
Yes.
Was a big piece that I probably it was probably mostly myself on that at the beginning, and then as it started to get integrated, people started to get kind of cycle back in. But there's a good couple of thousand lines of code just in the flight plan manager itself.
Right.
And so I'm pretty proud of that one. The cool thing about that is we've done a lot of firsts, you know, payware or freeware on the CJ4. You know, missed approaches, holds, intercept turns. There's a bunch of legs data that the stock game just drops. And then as well, you know, all the weird issues that you have with the stock flight plan system, like not being able to go direct to approach fixes, not being able to, just all that kind of weird stuff. We just didn't want that. So we figured out how it was working, and we decided we're gonna do it outside of the, you know, just outside of the stock flight plan system. We'll just make an entire flight plan system on the JavaScript, TypeScript end. So so that's what we did. So that's one of the big things that I've worked on. And some of the other stuff, you know, it's interesting. We have it's not a custom autopilot. You know, we're very careful about saying that.
Yes.
We're we're still using the stock autopilot under the hood.
Yes.
But we do drive it sort of in a I would say in a unique way, in sort of a clever way.
So that's the bit of your work that the fly-by-wire guys are looking at adapting for the A320, isn't it?
Yeah. So we've had a couple meetings with them and kind of given them the keys, so to speak. It's all, when I designed the flight plan manager, the standalone version, the idea behind it was to make it modular enough and, you know, composable enough that other projects could just kind of grab it and drop it into their own project. So it's not perfectly there. There are a few rough edges here and there, but more or less, you could take it and you could put it in something else. So I know that they're working on that right now, and we hope that they can get it integrated successfully.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's very interesting. I knew very little about how you all got together and what your various roles were, but I've certainly been flying and enjoying this aircraft for a little while. But for the purposes of this lesson, I'm going to basically let you instruct me on everything. So every step of the way, you can tell me exactly how it should be done, because I'm sure I've got some bad habits and there are certain things I just don't know. So I think that'll make the most useful video and tutorial, hopefully.
Sure, happy to.
Thank you. Right, so let's get on board. And today we're going to be flying from London Luton to Inverness. We're going to be doing an ILS approach into Inverness, and it's just a little flight which should show you a lot of the features that you need to fly the aircraft from A to B. We're not going to be able to cover everything it can do, but that's not really the aim of this lesson. It's to get you up and running. So the first thing I suppose we should talk about is flight planning, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good first topic.
So my understanding is that you can import a SimBrief flight plan into this aircraft, and that's what I usually do. Can you also use the world map screen and plan a flight that way?
You can, yeah. It's somewhat of I wouldn't say a new feature, but originally we just had the SimBrief import. We did add the main menu import as well, because as we got more and more and further away from the stock flight plan system, we had more requests for being able to do that. So you can do that now, yes.
Right, okay, great. Well, for the purposes of this, I have planned a flight on SimBrief, and I've done a little tutorial on how you do that, which I'll link to above for those of you who are new to SimBrief. But I suppose now we've got the flight plan, we should switch the aircraft on. So how do we do that? What's the first thing we do?
Yeah, so the first thing that we'll do is if we go to the sort of lower left panel to the left of the PFD there, you'll see the big red switch. We've got a battery switch, and we can just switch that to on.
Okay. Battery on.
Perfect.
And next?
And it looks like we may already be in partially a correct position, but if you just make sure down in the lower right there, just switch the avionics switch to dispatch, which is the down position.
Okay.
Fantastic. We'll get a little bit of a warning for battery amps, and we can just cancel that.
Okay, and so press the master caution for that, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And now we should have the MFD up and the FMC up.
Yes, we do. So this is the MFD and this is the FMC down here, right?
Perfect, yep.
Okay. What's next?
All right, so the very first thing we want to do is tell the FMC where we are. So if you go to the pause init, that's the line select key. On the left side and right side of the FMC, you've got the line select keys.
Right, yes.
And they are usually labeled LSK. And so you have LSK1 right, LSK1 left, et cetera, et cetera. So this one would be LSK, I guess that would be 6 right. 6
right, yeah. Okay, so we'll click on that.
And you'll see you've got set pause to GNSS. What that means, GNSS is the GPS guidance system. And so if you click the LSK next to that, that should put that in your scratch pad. And the scratch pad is just that little, in the ProLine 21, which is the unit that the CJ4 uses, it's that spot right there.
Yeah, okie dokie.
And then you can drop that same information in the set pause area where the boxes are.
Okay, so we'll plonk that in there.
Perfect, and now your warning has gone away.
It has. So we've got no flight plan showed down there. Is that the next thing we do?
That would be the next thing we do. Although, since this may be, we're kind of in tutorial mode here, so to speak, we may decide to use ground power so we don't run the battery down.
Okay, good idea. How do we turn that on?
So if you go to IDX,
Yeah.
on the second page, and you can go to the next page with the prev and next buttons.
Yeah.
There's the mod set, and if you press the button for that,
Yeah.
we can turn ground power unit to on.
Okie dokie. So the ground power unit's on. If we didn't have a ground power unit, do you have any idea sort of roughly how long we might be able to stay on battery power?
About 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay, cool.
The battery is not especially robust in the CJ4, and there's not... So it's something interesting that our pilot told us, which is the ground power is actually not used very often on the CJ4, just because you're often flying into shorter strips, smaller strips that don't necessarily have carts available. And also carts are expensive. It's, you know, it can be $100 or $150 for a usage. Right. Sometimes the fuel that you would burn by just turning your engines on would cost you less than using the, you know, calling for a ground power unit. So from a realism perspective, most likely we would just switch an engine on and get things rolling, because it usually only takes 10 to 15 minutes to put a plan in and get everybody on board. But for the purposes of this, I think it makes the most sense to just use the ground power.
Sure. So you could potentially start an engine before the passengers get on board just to provide power, could you?
You could, exactly.
Okay, cool. Right. So now we've done that, if we want to import our flight plan, we need to have put in our SimBrief pilot ID, right?
Correct.
So that's a step that you only need to do once, and once it's set there, it should keep it there forever. So this is not something you need to worry about every time. But okay, good. So we're on ground power. What's next?
All right. So if we want to do the SimBrief import, we can go back to IDX.
IDX, yeah.
And on page 2, once again,
yeah,
you'll see a route menu.
Yeah.
You can press that. And we should have flight plan recall SB. SB is for SimBrief.
Yes. And while we're here, this flight plan recall game would import the flight plan from the world map screen, right?
That is correct.
But for now, we'll click this button to import the SimBrief flight plan. Okay, so this is asking us to choose between 2 waypoints, right?
Correct. And what we've done here, which is, you know, as it is in the real unit, they should be sorted by distance from you. Yep. So the one that's closest will be at the top. Okay. You always want to double check the chart, but I think we're fairly sure that since
we're
it's
in the northern
completely
hemisphere.
different. Right, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll choose that one. And this one, I guess, will also be the top one.
Looks that way.
As will this.
Yep.
Okay.
Perfect. So the flight plan should be in there before we hit exec, which will kind of make the flight plan active. Right now, we're on a temporary flight plan, which is the way all modifications happen to the flight plan.
Right.
So if we go to the legs page, let's just double check and make sure that it looks the way we want it to look.
Okay. So you could, of course, compare this with your actual printed OFP. So we're going to be taking off from runway 07, Olney Welin Akupa, Timpo Elvos TNT. And do you know what? I am going to actually compare this with my flight plan rather than pretending I am.
Perfect.
Right, so Timpo Elvos Trent, Pole Hill Nelsa, yes, Ribble Ergab and Shap, correct. Abevi, Inpip, Utogu, yes, Inrev, Eskdo, Ipdor, Tala, Foil. There's a lot of waypoints, aren't there? I was expecting fewer.
Yeah, quite a few.
Short domestic flight. Urson, Inbas, Lagav, Nesdi. Yes, that's correct. Gussie, INS, and then to Inverness. That is correct. And of course, it hasn't imported our SID, has it?
No. So when doing the SimBrief import, because of the way I guess I would say because of the way the nav data works in the sim, there's not always an easy way of comparing what SimBrief calls a particular procedure with what the sim calls a particular procedure. And you'll note that on actual charts too. There are slight differences in the way the procedures are named between Navigraph charts and between Jeppesen charts and NavBlue charts and all those kinds of things. So it's up to the user to just look at what they've been provided on the chart and then pick that particular procedure.
Okay. All right. Cool. So we've checked the flight plan. What's next?
So we can hit exec, and that's just the exec button, and the white exec should go away, and that's telling you that now the flight plan is the active one. You also see it went from mod to ACT up in the upper left corner, the title area.
Yeah. Okay.
And so now we can pick our departure. So if we go to Dep R button, that will take us to the page, and on this page we have our departures.
Yes, and I think it was the only 2 Charlie departure that we wanted, so I'll choose that here.
Perfect. It looks like there are no transitions for that, so we can just hit execute right off the bat.
Yeah.
And we do want to go back to the legs page and just give it a quick double check, make sure it inserted okay.
Okay. So direct to 1025. Let's bring up the chart while we do this. So here you can see the chart in Navigraph, and I suppose it's generally a good idea to actually have the chart open when you're going through this, right?
Yeah, definitely. You just want to make sure, and this would be standard procedure, in the real thing as well. You always want to brief your procedures and just make sure that the FMC data is right. There are times in real life when the FMC data is actually not right, and so you may have to make adjustments.
Sure. Okay. So we're going to be taking off in this direction on the chart. And we've got distance 2.6 from ILTN, which is this Loc DME here. What's this initial waypoint? What's the 1025?
So 1025 in parentheses is a heading to altitude waypoint. So basically what that is saying is the waypoint is such in the nav data that it wants you to fly the runway heading until you hit 1,025 feet.
Okay, that makes sense. And then we've got 26 ILT, which is here. This is, again, well, this isn't in parentheses. What's this one here, D3150?
So that is going to be on the 315 radial. You'll see we've got BPK on the 315 radial.
Yes.
The D indicates that it is a radial-based fix. And then the O actually is the distance from the fix. So they start at A. A would be 1 nautical mile, B would be 2 nautical miles, etc. So 3150, oh boy, whatever O is. I'd have to count that.
15 could be.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, it is. So that is the D15 BPK that we have here. I never knew that. That's very interesting. Thank you. And then this next one, U, will be presumably D21 from Brookman's Park, because you use the 21st letter.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and then if we go to the next page, we then get to Olney, which is the end of our SID. And I notice it's here twice. Does that matter?
Yeah, so what we'll want to do in this case, and this happens sometimes with SimBrief import, or even if you're doing it yourself, you'll have the transition in your en route plan already.
Yes.
And so you'll end up putting that also in the departure, and you don't need them both. So we can just actually clear the second one out, which will leave the first one, which has our altitude restriction in it.
Okay, so we'll just get rid of that one. And then
we can execute that.
Execute again. So we've got rid of Olney. We've executed. What do we do next?
Yeah, so one of the things that I like to do is I like to just do a quick double check of the departure on the lower MFD there. So if we hit the lower menu button, actually this should be fine. It has them both in view.
Okay, lower menu.
The way that it works is the data knob there that you see, the outside of the data knob scrolls the menu, and the inside knob will activate a particular selection. So if you scroll down to plan mode, which is one of the map modes, and then just press the inner knob, that should get you to the plan mode there.
Okay, yes, perfect. I see it.
All right, so we can see there we have 26 ILT, and that turn, that intercept turn, looks basically like the chart. As mentioned before on the ProLine 21, you won't always see those large intercept turns rendered. Usually it's straight lines, but in this case, that looks pretty good.
Yeah.
And we see D3150 and the rest of them there. So I think this looks good.
Okay, great. What's next?
And actually, one more trick to the lower MFD, the plan mode.
Yeah.
If you go to MFD ADV on your FMC there,
yeah,
it stands for MFD Advance.
Right.
You can scroll through those waypoints by hitting the prev waypoint and next waypoint line select keys.
Okay.
So that can give you a view of the plan as you go or as you make changes if you're further along the flight plan, which is very convenient.
Oh, that is handy. So yeah, we can see the whole thing laid out before us. Okay, great.
One thing to note about the plan map, and we get a lot of questions about this, is there is no way to center it back on the plane. In the ProLine 21, the plan map does actually not. It actually doesn't center on the plane at all. The only plane-centered map mode is present position, the PPOS mode. So,
okay, is that what you normally fly with this MFD set to?
Yeah. So I will fly with the MFD set to present position, and usually have the needles, so the arc mode on the PFD.
Yeah. Okay, that's what I've been doing. So I'm glad that's a sensible way of doing it. So should we switch to PPOS now?
Yeah, let's do it now.
Okay. There we are, and this is now showing our heading, isn't it, as opposed to north up. I suppose that's the other difference between this and the plan mode.
That is
right?
the other difference. Yeah. There is no north, or there is no north up mode that follows the plane in the ProLine 21.
Right. Okie dokie.
So let's see, what should we do next? We've got our legs in there, and for this plan, is there an arrival? I can't recall.
There is no star. No, we go straight to the ILS, and I believe that the final point of our flight plan is our initial approach fix.
Okay, perfect. And do we have an expected approach today, don't we?
We do, yes, we do. We're going to be doing the ILS approach to runway 05 at Inverness.
Perfect. So if we want to load that in, we certainly can do that right now if we like.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so if you go back to the DEP-R, the departure arrival page,
yeah,
you should be able to switch to the arrivals by hitting departure arrival index. That's that guy right there.
Oh, yeah.
And then back to arrival.
Yeah.
And now we can pick our approach.
Okay, so we'll go for ILS 05. And then it gives us a choice of transitions.
I believe we had the INS transition we were going to try and do.
Yes, I believe we did. So I'll select that now. Well remembered, I'd forgotten that. There we are. And Perfect. Then exec again, is it?
Yeah, and before I execute, whenever I load an approach, I just go to double check the legs page again.
Okay.
So let's go to legs, and it should be at the end there.
Okay, so we've got a discontinuity there between INS and this next waypoint.
Correct. So there's a reason for that. In the ProLine 21, it doesn't want you to fly into an approach that you haven't sequenced. So even though INS is the end of our en route and it is the start of our approach, it just wants you to make sure that you've sequenced it yourself. There are times where you might be close to the approach and you select a different approach than you had originally thought you were going to do. Yeah. And so you don't want the plane to just start flying you towards that approach. You want to make sure that you're getting to the approach in the way that you want. And because of the discontinuity there, that gives you that time to do that, because it's not going to really fly you towards the next fix if there's a discontinuity. So we're already on the ground, so we can just clear that right now.
Okay. How do we do that?
If we just hit the clear delete button.
Clear delete.
That gives you the delete, and you should be able to hit the line select key next to the discontinuity now.
Ah, yes, I didn't know that either. I've just been clicking the next waypoint and moving it up like you do on Boeings. So there you are.
Oh, that works as well, yeah.
Yeah, but it's good to have that option. And then exec again, is it?
Exec again.
Okay.
So cool. Quick note on discontinuities. The only time that does not work is if it's a discontinuity following a vectors leg. And the reason for that is that a vectors leg, by definition, is where ATC is going to be vectoring you around. And so, as such, the FMC really doesn't know how are you going to get from one fix to the next. So you can't delete the discontinuity after a vectors leg but you can get rid of the vectors leg, which will also clear the discontinuity. So it's just a slightly different procedure for those.
Okay, that's worth knowing. Thank you. Okay, so that's our route done, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, and what comes next?
So let's load in the performance parameters for the plane. If you do that, you just hit the perf button.
Okay.
And go to perf init.
Perf init, yeah.
And what we'll want to do here is we'll want to make sure that this matches what we have actually loaded in the plane. And I'm not sure, if you selected something in SimBrief or are using the default, but we're going to want to reference the SimBrief and just make sure that our weights are the same and that they also match in the sim as well.
Okay, and this is actually quite useful. It's set to pounds at the moment, but obviously we're flying in Europe and my flight plan is in kilograms. How do we change over between the units?
Oh, perfect. Yeah, if we go to IDX, go to index.
Yeah.
Should be able to go to mod set again, which is on page 2.
Mod set, yeah.
And just switch it to metric.
Oh, yes, there it is. Awesome. Thank you. And what's that alarm about?
I'm not sure. Oh, we got some more... since it resets some parts of the displays, you might get those alarms again. So you should be able to clear those.
Just shut them up. Okay. Good. Right, so we've switched to metric units. So let's go back then to perf and perf init. And now we're in kilograms. Okay, so I need to look at my flight plan now, do I?
Yes, yep.
Okay. Right, so our zero fuel weight was supposed to be 5203 kilograms. So I really need to do this in the sim weight and balance page, I presume, do I?
Yeah, that will be the first stop.
Okay, let's do that now. So, of course, there isn't a zero fuel weight option, is there? So what I normally do in the A320 is adjust the fuel and then adjust the payload to match the takeoff weight. Is that what you do?
Yeah, that would be what we would do here too.
Okay. So we want 1180 block fuel, or as close as we can get. Better too much than too little, I'd say, so we'll leave it at 1202. And takeoff weight, we want 6329, so actually a little heavy. And a little bit under's no problem. So right, so we've done that now, so I'll close this window.
All right, so you can actually put your zero fuel weight directly into the FMC. There's a couple of ways of doing this. You could put in the number of passengers you have. You could add the cargo.
Yeah.
But if you don't have those, and a lot of times, when you're flying in real life, you don't have those exact numbers, but you have been weighed, and so you know what your zero fuel weight is.
Yep.
You can just drop the exact weight into that zero fuel weight box.
Okay. So 5203.
And you'll notice that it will get rid of the passenger and cargo options completely. You can put those back in, but it's kind of telling you, hey, you've entered this in a different way, so don't worry about that stuff.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, I'm happy with that.
And the only other thing we need to do on this page is just put in our cruise altitude.
Okay. And our planned cruise altitude, I think, was 430. Yes, it was.
Then we're good.
That's there, yeah.
Perfect. I think this looks great. So the next step is going to be the takeoff performance, and we can go to takeoff there.
Yeah.
And so the thing I like to do at this point, and this is just my own personal operations, is I like to switch the avionics completely on now and get out of dispatch mode. And the reason I like to do that is because we're going to be putting the V-speeds onto the PFD, and I like to make sure that they actually arrive.
Yes, okay. So because we're connected to external power, we don't need to worry about doing that now. So I'll turn the avionics to on. But if we were on battery power, is this something you would tend to leave until after you'd started the engines, or?
Yeah, if we were on battery power still, I would start the engines and then do the takeoff ref, because it doesn't take very long.
Okay, sure. And I suppose we need our our METAR, don't we? However,
we do.
We're not using live weather today because it was blooming miserable. So let's have a look at what I've set. Okay, so we're going to be doing 056 at 4 knots. And to get the temperature, we just go to settings, and it's 15 degrees. So we'll put that in there. QNH
Perfect.
is 1013, which is the default for all of the presets, I think. Okay, what next, Matt?
Yeah, if we want to head to the next page here.
Okay.
And you'll see now we do have V speeds indicated.
Oh, yes.
And one of the interesting things about the Proline 21 is you'll notice on the previous page, the OAT boxes, there were kind of those square boxes.
Yes.
And anytime you see those are mandatory inputs. And so if we hadn't put those in, you would not have seen the V speeds yet on this page. But we do have them, and so they've been calculated, and we can send those to the PFD.
Awesome. So we just click the send button here.
Yep.
And it's complete.
Perfect. So if we look over at the PFD, we should see them now.
Oh, yes, there they are. So 81, 86, and 102. And you'll notice that we are in hectopascals down here, but if we wanted to change to inches of mercury, how would we go about doing that?
Yeah, so in the DCP, the control panel above the PFD there, you could hit the PFD menu.
PFD menu, yeah.
And if you scroll down to config.
Yes.
And hit the center button, you can change it there by rotating that inner knob, and it'll switch you between the two modes.
Oh, yes, okay. And just escape to get out of it again.
Yep.
Right, okay. That's good to know. So what's the next step?
Well, I think it's time to get the engine started.
Yeah, sounds good.
Perfect. So we can close out of this lower menu now. We don't need that anymore.
Okay, get rid of the lower menu.
And what about how about let's go through the checklist for the engine start?
That sounds like a fine plan.
Cool, perfect.
So checklist button is here.
Yeah, and so going through the checklist is a lot like the other menus. You've got the outer knob there, or the outer ring of the knob, the menu advance that you see with data.
Okay,
and that will get you through that menu. Yep. And then pressing the knob will give you that selection.
Okay, cool. So before starting engines checklist, I guess.
Perfect.
Right, let's whiz through this. So battery switch is on. Emergency light switch is armed. That's in op at the moment, I think. Standby flight display switch is on.
Yep.
Avionics switch, it says dispatch, but we've actually gone the whole hog and turned it fully on. I'm sure that's fine. Parking brake should be set. That's down here. And it is set.
Looks good.
Wheel chocks removed. Cabin door, we can assume that's closed, I think.
Somebody did it for us.
Yeah. Passenger briefing. Now, we haven't done that, have we?
We haven't, but we could if you like.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. So that's this button here, presumably.
Yep.
And I noticed there's a long and a short version of the takeoff briefing. What's the difference between those, other than the length?
That is the primary difference, actually. But the long one is very long, and the short one is quite a bit abbreviated. So, a dealer's choice.
Okay, all right. Well, when would you use each one in the real world?
Probably if you have people who have never flown the plane before, you might use the long one to get people, sort of acclimated.
Okay.
Otherwise, just a short one will be fine.
Okay, let's do the short one for now.
May I have your attention, please?
And so while that's playing, I assume we can tick it off on our checklist.
We can indeed.
Oh, it scrolled down for some reason.
Ensure your seat is in the upright and
Okay, exterior lights.
Extend your headrest and fasten your lap belt.
Let's see. I think we also had the seatbelts. Oh, that's for the pilot. Okay, perfect. So yeah, exterior lights as required. As we're starting to turn the engines on, we would want to indicate as such by throwing some of those lights on there.
Okay, so we'll turn on the nav, I guess, and the beacon, and the logo for good measure. Yes, but you were mentioning seatbelts. It's a fair point. We skipped that one. But these are for the flight crew. Should we be turning on the seatbelt sign here now, or do we leave that till a bit later for the passengers?
Yeah, I think everybody's loaded up, so that seems like a good thing to do.
Yeah, okay. Right, I'll bung those on. Good.
May I have your attention, please?
Exterior lights, yes, so we've done that. And ICAS.
Fasten your seatbelt.
Looks
Everything
right.
looks good there.
Yeah. FMS has been checked and set quite nicely, I would say.
Indeed.
Climate control selector.
So that is on the left-hand side there. You'll see it's by the pilot fan, and currently it is already off, so we're good there.
Okay, cool. Checklist complete. Okay, so now onto the starting engines checklist. Throttles are idle.
Very good.
Engine starter button.
Yeah, so that is actually going to be behind the throttles there. You'll see the left and right starter button.
Okay.
And
yes.
You'd normally sort of cycle back and forth which one you start first. We'll just do the left today.
Okay, so press that. And then engine run stop button.
Yeah, you just release the guard there on the run stop button, and then you can hit run at any time.
Okay. So you don't have to wait for a particular indication up here, you just go ahead and press it.
Yeah, so the interesting thing with these Williams engines is with the FADEC, the FADEC will actually figure out when to start injecting fuel for you. So you are allowed to hit that run button basically any time after you hit the ignition on, and it will manage the startup for you. And then in that way you don't get hung starts and hot starts and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, right, that is fancy. Excellent. So we've got an increase in N2 and N1.
Yep, should settle about 24, 25-ish.
Okay. And we do have to start these separately, I presume, or can we start them together?
Yeah, you would want to start them separately. Together, it's too much drain on the battery. So once you have at least one engine going, you've got one generator kicking in, and now you can start the other engine.
Right, okay. So same procedure. Start and run.
And we can also close those guards now that we're done with those.
Ah, yes, good point. Good. So
don't want to spill our coffee onto those buttons.
No, absolutely. So we can tick these off the checklist. ITT, check for rise. It's rising. It's risen, in fact. ICAS, still green.
That also, yep, still looks good.
Yeah. Opposite engine we're doing. External power we no longer need. So if I remember rightly, that's under index. Page 2, mod set. Ground power unit off.
Yep, exactly, perfect.
Good. Electrical system, that's hidden behind this checklist, isn't it, I think?
It is at the moment, but I assume everything is going well there. We don't have any warnings.
No, good. Right, that's that one complete. And we're on to before taxi already. It's gone very, very quickly. Good.
Yeah.
So, avionics switch is on because we turned it on a while back.
Yep, we turn that on to get that PFD going for us.
Yeah. Climate control selector, we checked that was off, but now we can turn it to normal.
Yeah, and one of the cool things about that in specific is our pilot also recorded the fan sound from the real CJ4 for the climate control. So that's right from the plane itself.
That's incredible, and it does sound as if you're there. I've always been impressed by that fan sound. Good. Passenger light safety button. Well, that's on because we just turned it on. Trims.
Yeah, it looks like you can see we're a little bit out of the green area there in the elevator trim, and the green area is where you're going to want to be for takeoff.
Right.
And it's not exactly precise. So we're a little bit light today, so we're going to want to be at the sort of nose down area of the green there.
Okay.
And if you're a bit heavier, you'd have that closer to the nose up area. And so it's not an exact science. The Proline avionics and the CJ4, they don't calculate CG automatically. So this green band does not move like it does on other aircraft.
Right.
So you just kind of have to set it by feeling how you know your load is.
Okay, so for takeoff, anywhere in the green band is all right, but if you're a bit lighter, then have the pointer higher, and if you're a bit heavier, have it lower.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, cool. So we'll tick that one off. Flight controls, I think we can assume that they are fine in the sim.
And if not, we've got problems.
Yeah. If not, we'll just reboot the computer and start again. It'll be fine.
There you go.
Speed brakes and ground spoilers. Just give this a little cycle, I guess.
Indeed.
And flaps.
Yeah, so if you go back to the perf page there
Yeah.
and head to takeoff again,
Yeah.
give it one more page forward.
Mm-hmm.
You notice we've got takeoff flaps set to 15.
Yes.
And that's basically the only takeoff flap setting that you would use. There are indications in the pilot's handbook for using flap 0. It's really only used in special situations if you're particularly sort of heavy or hot or high, and you need a little bit more speed before you get off the ground. So in almost every situation, we would just use flaps 15, and that's what we'll do here.
Okay, that's easy to remember. So we'd better set them then before clearing up. So there's flaps 15 up here.
Very good.
Hydraulic pressure.
Looks okay.
Uh-huh. Engine only anti-ice.
Well, I think the temperatures look okay, so probably none of that today.
Yeah. Takeoff data. That's these V speeds, I presume, is it?
It is, yep.
Yeah. Okay, so we've set those. Avionics.
I think everything looks okay. I don't see any warnings. The displays all look good.
Autopilot engage/disconnect.
Yeah, so we'll just cycle the autopilot and make sure that it's functioning.
Okay. AP.
Oh yeah, we see roll and pitch, default modes there, so that's good.
Yeah.
AP is on. Excellent.
And turn it off again.
Autopilot.
So we still have roll and pitch there, and a YD up here.
Yeah, so the interesting thing is that on the CJ4, the autopilot itself, the yaw damper is always on when the autopilot is on. And when you turn the autopilot off, the yaw damper does not come off automatically. So you really only need to worry about the yaw damper when the autopilot is off. And so, you know, as we cycled it now, we could just turn it off at this point.
Right. I didn't know that. You see, I've been pressing yaw damper and autopilot on takeoff, but actually just the AP button will do both for setting them up.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we can select that. Altimeter, well, that's set to 1013, so we can be happy with that. And pressurization, that's not modeled, is it?
It is not modeled as of yet, correct.
Okay. ICAS,
Still looking good.
still looking good. And aft divider doors.
Just yell down the galley, somebody will take care of it.
Yeah. So that's that one done. And the next normal checklist is the taxi checklist.
Yeah.
So, exterior lights. We've got most of them sorted. I presume we just turn the taxi light on now, do we?
Yeah, I think just taxi light will be fine.
Okay. Brakes. Apply/hold.
Yeah, we're about to release the parking brakes, so they want you to get some pressure on those brakes so you don't end up rolling forward a bit.
Okay, I will squeeze the trigger. Parking brake. That's down here, so we can release that.
Yep.
Brakes. Check.
That's just really a pressure check there. Make sure that they feel okay.
Okay. I mean, the trigger feels much like it always does, so I'm happy with that. Nose wheel steering, I'm sure will be fine. We'll see when we start. Flight instruments.
Let's see. We've got everything up. The secondary instruments are up too, and I think that's fine.
Okay, cool. Checklist complete. And the next one is the before takeoff checklist. So I presume we're ready to start moving.
That's correct. Yeah, we can get taxiing now.
Okay, let's go.
Looks like we've got some motion here.
Yeah. Now the fun really begins.
Yeah, so the interesting thing about the CJ4 is it's got a very sharp caster wheel angle. I think it's something like 60 degrees. So you won't normally have to push back. Yeah. Every once in a while, I'm sure you'll get into a situation where you do, but usually you can swing it around pretty easily.
Cool.
And as far as, kind of taxi procedure goes with throttle and such, it does like to roll. There's a lot of thrust.
Yes.
But as long as you kind of give it a little nudge and then dial it back to idle, you can usually keep the speeds very reasonable.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm on idle throttle at the moment and seems to be bimbling along quite comfortably.
Yeah, looks good. So I'm not familiar with this area airport. Is this an add-on scenery?
It is, yeah. This is UK 2000's version of Luton.
Oh, it looks nice.
It is nice, yeah. I did a review of it a little while back. There are some issues with it. There are some lumps and bumps in the taxiways, a few terrain issues, and some of the textures aren't the best. But I've got a soft spot for Luton Airport because it's the first place I ever flew from without my parents when I was a sort of adolescent. So that was exciting.
Oh, cool, yeah.
Yeah. There's one of those lumps and bumps I was talking about.
Yeah, it seems like they haven't quite sorted out how to best keep, some elevation of the taxiways, but kind of keep them free from various potholes and stuff. So
yeah.
I have noticed, yeah, you will get those random potholes every now and then.
Yes. So we're now at the hold short point for runway 5. What else do we need to do?
Yeah, so let's start taking a look at that next checklist, the before takeoff checklist there. Okay.
So ice protection systems, we've decided we don't need, haven't we?
Correct, yep.
Rudder bias system, I don't know what that is.
I don't know what that is either, actually.
Good. Feel better now. Seats are upright and outboard. Flaps are set at 15. Speed brakes, let's have a quick glance. They are at 0%, as they should be. Trims set for takeoff, we've already done that. Although interestingly, this is now slightly above the green band, so I'll just readjust it. Pretty sure.
Yeah, it may have been the autopilot may have played with that for a little bit while we had that set there.
Ah, yeah, that would explain it.
So it's good that that's there.
Yeah. Crew briefing. Complete.
Well, yeah.
TCAS.
So TCAS is not yet modeled, so we can just skip through that.
Okay. Radar.
This is pretty flat area. I don't think we need to have our terrain radar on unless you do.
No, I don't think so. What about weather radar? Would we put that on now or not?
If we felt we needed to.
Okay, but it's not a standard thing like on an airliner.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. GA button.
All right, so this is a bit of an interesting thing. So the CJ4 has both a takeoff and go around mode. Depends on where you are in the flight, which one of those you get. Where we are right now, we're still on the ground. We're going to get takeoff mode. The actual button is located on the side of the throttle. However, that's basically impossible to get to in the sim. So we have that modeled as being underneath the left fire bottle button. So that big spot that doesn't really do anything right now, you can hit that and that'll put you in takeoff mode.
Okay. Oh yes, and we've got takeoff indications here. Right.
So all takeoff mode does is it keeps your current heading reference when you lift off, and it gives you a 10-degree pitch up reference. It doesn't do anything to your throttle, unlike unlike most airliners, excuse me.
Yeah.
Where it's going to adjust your throttle for you. So in the CJ4, the throttle is always pilot's discretion.
Okay. Battery amps, verify 20 or less. They're going to be hidden under here, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. But the battery system is a little wonky at the moment, so we'll just assume that that's okay.
Okay. Ice protection systems again. They're very keen that we check these, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah.
Pitot static heat buttons.
We are actually now in a position to turn those on. So in the actual aircraft, you get about 5 minutes of those being on the ground before they totally burn out.
Oh, right.
So you're not supposed to turn those on until just before you're about to take off, and we're right in that position, so this is perfect timing.
Interesting. Okay, thank you. Exterior lights. This is where we set landing, is it?
Yes, landing at this point, yep.
And strobe?
Strobe is good.
Okay. And we're going to assume that the ICAS is okay, aren't we, I think?
Yep, I don't see any reds or yellows.
No. Right, and the next checklist is takeoff.
Yeah, so normally you're not obviously, doing this as you're taking off. It gets a little bit busy. So, this tells you what you'll need to do, and then we'll check those things off once we get stabilized in our climb.
Okay, fine. So shall I close this checklist menu for now?
Yep, we can do that.
Okay. Right, so talk us through what happens next. Do we need to be doing anything with the autopilot before we go, or
so
what?
we do have takeoff mode set. If we change any other modes, we're going to lose our takeoff mode.
Okay.
You have options here. Different pilots will do different things. Some pilots will set their heading reference. Some pilots will put in a speed reference and then go to kind of put FLC on, so that when they hit autopilot, it will automatically go to FLC.
Right.
We're going to do it. We're going to just use takeoff mode today. But what we do want to do once we get lined up on the runways, we will want to set our heading reference to the runway heading, just in case we need to go to heading mode.
Okay, sounds good. So shall I line up?
Yeah, let's do it.
Suppose we may as well use the full length.
Yeah, shouldn't need much, but the
No.
full length will be great.
Couple of dodgy lights plonked in the middle of the turning pan.
They're procedural.
They are. Really whizzed around that corner there. I can't imagine the passengers would have enjoyed that very much, but anyway.
There's vomit bags for that.
Yeah, but we'll need them in the cruise, I'm pretty sure. You haven't seen my flying yet. Okay, so here we are.
All right, so we've got the brakes applied.
Yeah.
All right, so things are going to happen very fast, so I'm going to talk us through it before it happens.
Mm-hmm. Did you say, first of all, heading mode? We should set the heading?
Yeah, so if you just press the heading knob, that'll get us to, that'll set the reference to our current heading.
Okay, yeah, there it is, yeah.
Perfect. There's not really anything else we need to do with the autopilot at the moment, although what we should probably do is set our altitude pre-selector to wherever we first want to level off, or wherever we would be cleared to first.
Okay.
So in this case, we probably have a first restriction. If we go look down to the legs page, we can see what our restrictions are on this procedure.
Right, so 1,000 or above, 3,500 or above, and then 6,000.
So I would say we're definitely going to be above 1,000 by that first point.
Yep.
And we're most certainly going to be above 3,500 by that second. So let's set it to 6,000 and kind of match that at restriction.
Okay.
Because we don't want to blow that restriction there until we pass that spot.
No. And is this somewhere where you might use VNAV? If you
VNAV
wanted
is
to.
interesting in the climb. So with the ProLine 21 avionics system, there is no sort of VNAV climb path. All VNAV does for you in the climb is it levels you off at restriction. So in this case, we could set a vertical mode like FLC, and we could set VNAV, and then it will level you off at 6,000. But it's not used very often, so we'll just go with the kind of standard setup for right now.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
All right, so we've got our altitude dialed in. We've got our heading dialed in. So I think we're close to getting ready to go here.
Okay.
So the procedure is basically going to be, we'll push the throttles full forward. That'll put us in the takeoff position. It's actually a detent all the way at the end.
Okay. Let's have a look at that. Yep. So you got takeoff here.
Yep. And what will happen at that point, we'll want to wait for that to stabilize, and then we can release the brakes. It is also possible, with this aircraft, it has so much thrust, you can very well do just a rolling takeoff as well. You don't have to have the brakes on and then let it stabilize. But since we're already stopped, we can do that, and I'll shorten our roll just slightly.
Okay.
And at that point, it's all the same as everything else. We're going to just look at our V speeds, and we'll rotate when we hit the correct speed.
Okay, sounds good. So let's do it, I guess.
Yeah, let's do it. All right, so yeah, let's push the throttle up, and we're going to be ready to go into FLC and heading after we get kind of stabilized a little bit in the climb. So we'll just expect those things, but let's get the throttle up, and then we'll get going.
Okay, so I'm holding the brakes. There's the engine stabilized.
Perfect. Speed is alive.
Yeah. V1, rotate.
And just keep it on that 10 degrees there.
Yeah, a little bit high there, aren't I?
Not a problem. And at this point, we can knock it back into the climb detent.
Okay, so I've listened for the click.
And we can go gear up and flaps up.
Gear up and flaps up. Now, I'm still getting that nose a little high there. Should be sticking at 10, shouldn't I?
Yeah, and you'll notice that you'll basically immediately need to go a decent amount of nose down, probably a good 40 to 50% nose down trim.
Yes. So at what point
once we get to... Oh, sorry.
No, go on. Go on.
I was going to say, once we get to 200, we can engage FLC, and we probably also want to go to heading mode at this point. So we're close enough to both of those. So let's hit FLC and heading.
FLC and heading.
And we can turn the autopilot on.
And turn the autopilot on.
And now let's just dial FLC up to 240.
FLC up to 240.
And then we can swing heading mode to the left to kind of follow our course here.
Okay. Yeah, it is very much like flying a rocket, isn't it? You compare it to
the climb rate is it's exceptional.
When you compare it to any airliner.
And I see our altitude flashing already, so we're going to be quickly approaching.
Yes.
Our level off.
Yeah. And I need to reduce the throttles, don't I? Or not?
Yes, you will need to reduce the throttles. Yep. Yeah, we did capture already, so flight level change is no longer in play here.
Yeah.
So what we'll do here, we took that turn, and if you look at the charts, they want you to take that turn to intercept the next leg.
Yes.
So you'll probably need to get a little bit more heading in there.
Yeah.
But then we can arm nav mode at this point. It's not going to capture yet because we're not close enough, but if you hit it, you'll see we get LNB1, and then that will go. And once we're close enough, nav will become nav will become active from armed.
Okay, so it's a bit like capturing a localizer in that sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
So speeds under 8,000 are 260. And you'll see we got very nearly that, but we dialed back, so that's good.
Yeah.
And so according to the chart here, and I see on the legs page, we're at 6,000 for a little while.
Yes. But we could assume that ATC have cleared us for hire at any point, really, if you want to.
Totally up to you, sure.
Let's stick with this until the next waypoint, and then maybe we can do some climbing. And it seems to be intercepting the path now.
Perfect. Yep. Looks like nav became active.
Yes, and that's and you know that because it changed from white under here to green, which shows it's active, right?
Correct. Yeah. The armed modes are on the bottom, and they're all in white, and
Yeah.
The active modes are up top in green.
Okay.
I'm getting a nice intercept here.
Yeah, nice and smooth. Yeah, I think I really do need to do some practice with my takeoffs. I always end up with too high an attitude every time.
It's really tricky. Even we had some feedback from another CJ4 pilot who had the same feedback, which was nose down trim comes in really fast, and it's one of the things that he actually didn't like about flying it in real life sometimes is just the climb schedule is very strange. You're not in most airliners, you would not be dialing in that much nose down trim that early, or maybe even at all, depending on the weight configuration. So it is kind of a unique setup, just because of the shape of the wings and the amount of thrust that you have behind you. You get in that situation very quickly.
Yeah, and you can see that the Autopilot's dialed in a huge amount of nose down trim here now, can't you? So. Yeah,
and if you watch, there's a few people who have some CJ4 videos up on YouTube.
Yeah.
And if you watch those, you'll see the exact same thing. You know, it's right in that that mid space between the green band and the top of nose down.
Yeah. Yeah. And is that because of the way it's laid out with the physical model that you've got the engines and the tailplane at the back which just bring the tail down?
Yeah, it has a lot to do with that. It has a lot to do with kind of the pretty straight wing where the CG is mostly what that's about. It's kind of a slightly stretched version of the earlier smaller planes. So all that combined, you do get kind of a nose up tendency with it.
Yeah.
I have to give a shout out to our flight model designer, who is the same flight model designer actually doing the Aerosoft CRJ at the moment. So
right.
He's done a fantastic job with this. There are little things here and there, obviously, that we're continuing to dial in, but it flies very nicely now.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, I should say it's very much the skill of the pilot that led to us being a little bit all over the place on takeoff rather than the aircraft itself.
I do the same thing, so...
Good, yeah. I feel a bit better now.
All right, so I'm not sure where our 6,000 restriction ends.
I think it's this next waypoint here, if I remember rightly.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no, it's not. It's only. Yeah, so it's here.
I would say we could just put it up to our cruise altitude then.
Let's
get it up to 43.
And I've said this in some of my streams because I believe it to be true, but I want to double check. These business jets, these light business jets, do typically cruise at altitudes of 430 and above, right?
Yeah, actually, the feedback that we got was you will almost always be above 40,000. If you are anywhere beyond, say, even just a 400 nautical mile trip, you're going to be 40,000 and above.
Right. Okay. Right. So I've dialed in 43,000, and how are we going to get up there?
Yeah. So let's do flight level change again.
Okay.
That should capture the current speed, which is let's see, we've got 249.
249. Yeah.
Just dial that back to 240.
239.9 okay for you?
I think that's fine, yeah.
Good.
And then we can put it back into the climb detent.
Ah, yes.
All right, so I guess it's probably time to talk a little bit about how the FADEC works in the CJ4.
Yeah, sure.
So the FADEC is interesting. It's not an auto throttle. The CJ4 doesn't actually have any kind of auto throttle mode at all. Mm-hmm. However, so takeoff mode is effectively maximum engine power, as much as it will deliver.
Right.
And that's flat rated to 26 Celsius. So when we talk about flat rating is where the engine can produce more thrust at colder temperatures or lower altitudes, but the FADEC actually limits that. So engines that are flat rated have an excess of thrust available, and the reason that they have that is so that the takeoff performance is consistent at a varying number of altitudes and pressures.
Okay.
And so we actually do model that in our FADEC. We do model the flat rating. So you'll notice that up to about 4,000 or 5,000 feet, the takeoff performance is basically the same.
Right.
So the takeoff mode is that. It's the flat rated maximum available power. And what climb mode really is for these Williams engines is maximum sustainable power without damaging the engines. And that tends to increase in N1 as you get higher because the air gets colder and your temperatures of the components and such get lower as well. So you'll notice that the N1 will steadily increase in the climb detent because we are able to increase the rotations because we don't have as much hot air going into the engine.
Yeah, I've noticed that. First time I've even looked at it. Very interesting.
And the other interesting thing about that is it tends to even out the thrust that you get. So you get a more consistent climb performance as you go up. So it's pretty cool. But again, it isn't an auto throttle, so you don't have that. It's not that exact same concept.
No. Okay. I'm just going to point out two things I did as we were climbing in case people saw me pushing things and didn't know why. So I just set standard pressure above the transition altitude of 6,000 feet, which makes no difference because we were on 1013 anyway. And I just turned the landing lights off of passing through 10,000 down here.
Perfect. I'm a bad pilot and I always forget to do those things, so I'm glad you remembered.
I always forget something. I don't think... I've been flight simming for 20 odd years now, and you'd have thought I'd at least have the basics down pat by now, but no. Every flight there's something that I forget.
Yep.
Just the norm.
All right, so the other thing you'll notice here on the flight guidance system display, which is the set of modes on the top of the PFD.
Okay, these up here.
Yep, we've got Alt-S as a armed mode. So Alt-S indicates to us that we are going to eventually capture our selected altitude. If it was a VNAV selected altitude, that would be ALTV, and we'll probably see that during the descent. We'll probably use VNAV during the descent to kind of demonstrate that.
Okay.
But that's the difference between those two modes. So it's telling you the next mode coming up is going to be this altitude capture mode. We have a little while until we get there, but this thing climbs fast. It's, I think, about 27 minutes to 45,000, so very quick.
Right. And this is something that's come up on my streams, actually. People have said, gosh, you're climbing very fast. What about the passengers' ears popping and comfort and all of that? And I've always just said, well, I think this is realistic. I think this, light business jets will climb at these kind of rates, 4,000 feet a minute sometimes. Is that true?
Yeah, that is true. We've, in speaking with our pilot, if you do something crazy like climb at VY, that thing will get up to 8,000 or 10,000 feet per second right off the ground. I mean, just crazy climb rates. It is indeed a rocket. And so this climb rate actually matches. We did a lot of testing, especially when we were building out the FADEC. These climb rates are extremely close to the books. So yeah,
right.
This is exactly spot on.
Cool. I suppose we could turn the seatbelt sign off as well, actually, no, couldn't we? It's quite smooth.
Oh, yeah.
And the safety light, does that come off? I suppose it does.
Yeah, I think it's safe to turn that off now.
Cool. And the one thing that we didn't go through when we were setting up is the passenger briefings, which you can use, I suppose, if you wish to. But you were saying off air that these were actually recorded as well from a real aircraft, weren't you?
Yeah, all of these briefings were recorded from an actual CJ4. Yeah, it's funny because people always they think that we recorded them ourselves, or it's a sort of a fake kind of flight attendant briefing. But the plane will actually say these things if you press these buttons in real life. So
yeah.
Which is kind of funny because the long one is in fact quite long. They're not kidding about that.
Yes, I've heard it. Yeah. Goes through pretty much everything.
Yep.
So I can't remember at what point we did these briefings. We may have recorded them in a clip already, but I thought I'd do it again just in case. Because now we're climbing up to cruise level, I can chop bits out of this and it should all be okay, I think.
Yeah, sounds good.
Is there anything else you want to talk about during the climb?
No, not a whole lot. I think the only thing I was going to point out was the waypoints flashing on the PFD and MFD that happens sometimes that you notice.
I can't say I ever had, but yeah, do point that out if it happens.
Yeah, actually, we are coming up to our fix right here, and you'll notice in probably just a few more tenths of a nautical mile, the fixes themselves on the PFD and MFD will start flashing.
Okay.
And the reason for that is it's to indicate, yep, there we go. It's to indicate to the pilot that the FMS is about to sequence to the next waypoint. So that will happen roughly 4 to 5 seconds before it's going to sequence for you.
Okay.
And then as you notice, when that happens, the next leg turns magenta, and the previous leg kind of disappears from the map.
Yes.
One other thing to note with fixes and turns and such is, as in the real jet, turn anticipation does take care of most overshoots, and we're still dialing in some overshoot scenarios in our kind of custom over-the-top autopilot implementation. But if you get above 90 degrees, 100 degrees, 110 degrees, you will see some overshoot, and the real plane does overshoot in those scenarios as well. So. It does have kind of a maximum of how much turn anticipation it will apply, which I believe is 7 nautical miles when you're under 325 knots of ground speed, and then 10 nautical miles above that. I may be misremembering the exact speed break point, but it does switch between those two limits.
Okay. So just to clarify this in my mind, I'm sure everyone who's watching probably has already got the hang of this, but when you're talking about turn anticipation, you're talking about particularly a certain angle between two legs, are you?
Yeah. So at the end of the leg, you got the fix, and let's say that the next leg was 90 degrees to the right of your current leg. The turn anticipation basically says, I will need 5 nautical miles in order to complete this turn successfully. Let's say we're sort of cruising at a high rate of speed.
Okay.
And it will sequence to the next waypoint when it determines that its turn radius sort of meets that next leg. So you notice sometimes when you're very high and very fast, and you've got a fairly decent amount of angle between two legs, that waypoint alerter, the flashing, will come up relatively early. And then it will switch to the next leg, and that's to get you the best possible turn to intercept into the next leg with the lowest amount of overshoot.
Right, I'm with you. Now I notice as we're climbing that we're no longer maintaining 240 knots. We're now maintaining Mach 0.64, and that's standard, is it?
It is, yeah. So the crossover point where those two speeds match up, where 240 becomes Mach 0.64, is where it will automatically switch you over into Mach mode. It's funny, there's a very specific altitude, 28,744 actually, is where they define the transition altitude. I know, it's very odd.
Yeah.
And that's around there is normally where it will switch, but it is where they intersect, and the MSFS Mach calculation is not super precise,
right.
So it's not always exactly at that altitude where we flip it over. But the red tape, the overspeed tape, does switch to Mach 0.77 at that crazy altitude, that 28,744.
Okay. So we've just had our altitude call out there as we're approaching 3,000 feet. I think it does it 1,000 feet before, right?
That's correct, yep.
And does anything in particular need to happen when we level off?
No, it should. We should see Alt-S become the active mode, and we can actually leave it at climb power until we kind of reach cruise speed. And with these, cruise speed is as fast as you want to go. There's rich people in the back, and they want to get to their golf tournament. So it's as close to the red line as you can get is where we're going to be.
Right. Okay. You're on. Ah, yes, we've got Alt-S cap up here now.
Perfect. That means it's in the capture phase, and we should probably see the cap drop off as we get close.
Mm-hmm. Ah, yes, there it is.
There we go. Another thing you'll notice is we've seen a lot of those modes flashing up there, and people often ask, why is there so much flashing?
Yeah.
Well, for these modes, every time the mode changes, it actually flashes to alert you that it has changed. And the reason for that is they don't want the pilots to miss a mode change. It's very important that the pilots know if the autopilot has changed the mode sort of from underneath you. And so you'll always see those things flashing when the mode changes.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
And it looks like we're creeping up slowly on the red line here in climb power.
Yeah. So really for the rest of the cruise, the key is just adjusting your throttles to maintain something that's as close to the red line as you dare get.
Yeah, and people ask, do I need to be adjusting all the time? How do I really set the cruise power so that I can, go grab a sandwich and stuff like that? And the idea there is to just make small adjustments and let it settle.
Okay.
And we don't have to, we don't have to be within a hair's breadth of the red line if we want a little bit more, a little bit more buffer there for us if winds change or if weather changes. Obviously, in this case, weather's not really going to change,
No.
but it's it's one of those things that you just want to do small adjustments, let it settle out, and see where your speed ends up.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so we're about 215. That gives us a good 5-knot buffer. I think we can pull back ever so slightly on the throttle here out of the climb detent.
Okay, I'll do that now. A little bit more.
That looks pretty good. Maybe a touch less.
Yeah.
I think what we want to see there is the speed tape slightly going downward.
Okay. There we go.
That looks pretty good. It should settle out at a reasonable cruise speed.
Okay. So yeah, this is something else I've been doing differently. I have been trying to get it right on that red line and making tiny adjustments all the time to keep it there. But of course, if you just reduce the power a little bit, yeah, you're going to fly a tiny bit slower, but it should at least settle down, I guess.
Yeah, you should find that you get real close and you just back it off just a touch, and you should find a speed where it kind of balances itself out.
Mm. How do we zoom out on this map?
So that is the inner knob, the rightmost knob on the DCP there, and the DCP is that control panel above the PFD, which stands for the display control panel.
Display control panel, right.
And that knob is a little weird, so it says toggle auto tilt for weather radar antenna.
Yes.
And the reason for that is it's actually 3 concentric knobs, and for some reason the click spot for one of those shows when it shouldn't, and we haven't figured out.
I see, yes.
Yeah, I haven't quite figured out how to get that not to show.
Right.
But that will zoom you in and out. And the rotation is a bit backwards from what you expect, but that is the correct rotation per the real unit as well.
Okay. So it's right to zoom out then?
Correct, yep.
Yeah, okay.
And the reason for that is you're increasing the range. So if you think about it that way, as opposed to increasing the zoom,
yes,
that's one way to sort of wrap your brain around it. It doesn't work for me. I turn it the wrong way every time, but that's what I keep telling myself is if you just think of it that way, it'll work.
Yeah, it does make sense when you put it like that. Yeah. Is there anything else we should be doing during the cruise other than keeping an eye on the airspeed?
Not really. You know, I like to keep the legs page up and just, you know, double check that, you know, there are no weird restrictions coming up, although that's really going to be taken care of by VNAV.
Right.
But everything looks good.
Sure. So Matt, tell me about the cockpit lighting. I've been trying to think of a way of segueing into that, and there really isn't a way. So yeah, talk us through that if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. Yeah. So all or the majority, I guess I should say, of the cockpit lighting is all down sort of by the throttle area. You've got three knobs there.
Oh yes, yeah, okay.
So you've got the PFD and MFD knobs that will change the brightness for those.
Right, let's have a go at that. Oh yes, I can see that making a change up there.
Yep.
And that's just changing the inner PFD.
Correct. That's the MFD there.
Sorry, yeah, MFD I should say, yeah.
And the outside should control the PFD, if I recall.
Ah, okay. Ah, yes. I genuinely never noticed that there were two separate controls there. That's good. Thank you.
Yeah, it took me a while to get that one myself.
Yeah, and then presumably this other one does the same for the right seat.
That is correct, yep.
Okay.
And it gives you that, I don't know why it gives you that, you know, you can't turn this thing, you know, the little icon there. I think it's when it gets to the stops, but I've also noticed it when it hasn't, so just kind of fiddle with it, and it should work eventually.
Yes, okay. Oh yeah, I see what you mean. Very odd. Okay, so that's those.
And then the center one is just your, you know, sort of your actual backlight brightness for the labels and such.
Ah, yes, okay. Cool.
And then if you want to change the brightness of the FMC, there is a bright dim button there. Bright obviously makes it brighter, dim makes it dimmer. You can kind of just hold those down, and they'll eventually do their thing.
Okay. Oh yes, it's very gradual, isn't it? Yeah.
It is, yep.
You could easily click that and think, oh, it's not doing anything. So that's a good tip. Right, thank you. That's very useful.
Yeah. All right, so I guess while we're up here, we can talk a little bit about some of the interesting idiosyncrasies of that lower PFD display right there.
Yeah, sounds
so
good.
If we want to zoom on that a little bit and kind of keep that DCP in view as well, so we'll sort of reference that.
Okay.
All right, so the PFD is interesting. It's normally this is the way that you'd have it set up to fly. You'd have the left with your needles up, your course needles, and the right with the map up.
Right.
And the reason for that is if you have your needles in any other nav source selection other than the FMS, you actually cannot select a map mode on the PFD.
Oh, right. Interesting.
So if your nav mode was, say, VOR1 or VOR2, it's not going to let you go into present position mode. So given that oftentimes you are switching nav sources, and we probably will only do that once we get to the ILS here, but you know, sometimes you'll pick up a VOR and that kind of thing. Yeah. You know, in the course of a flight. That's why I leave present position PPOS mode up on the MFD, because you're normally using the needles on the left side. Okay, makes sense. So that's one interesting thing. The other thing to note here is you see preset VOR1. Yes. That's kind of like a comms preset in a way. It works the same way. So what this is telling you is it's saying when you hit that nav button, and this is not the nav button in the middle of the flight guidance panel. This is the nav button that you see in the DCP here above the PFD. Yes. That this will one swap as opposed to that one. Yeah. Yep. That's going to swap nav sources for you, and so the preset is telling you what the next nav source is. Okay. So if you were to hit that, and you shouldn't right now because we don't have anything tuned, and then it will not fly FMS anymore. Right. If you hit that, it's going to swap to VR1, and then it will drop the current nav source into the preset. So you would see FMS1 as the preset there. Okay. Okay, that's interesting. And can you change the nav source that's preset? You can. So if you rotate the inner center knob, which is the data knob, you can change what is preset. Oh yes. Okay.
And for our ILS, I genuinely can't remember this, but that counts as VOR for the purposes of this preset, does it?
It does. That will, if a localizer is tuned, that indication will change to loc1 instead of VOR1.
Okay, right.
And as we'll see when we get closer, we'll start to hit a procedure called NAV-to-NAV transfer, where it kind of seamlessly transfers you from FMS into the localizer as your nav source. And so that's a little bit of a different procedure, but the system handles it for you, and we'll kind of see that as we get to that point.
Okay, right.
The only other interesting thing here is you see TERR and WX.
Yes.
That just indicates if the terrain mode or the weather mode is on. If the terrain mode is up, TERR will be blue and be slightly bigger. Exactly like that. And one thing that we added in the latest version, in the 0.10 series, is relative terrain radar. So now the terrain radar actually is relative to your current altitude, and so you won't see a bunch of green like you would see in a Garmin unit. It will just be black, and then you'll see sort of greens transitioning to oranges and reds as those terrain heights get above you. So it's really just there to warn you if you're going to hit something. It's not there to sort of give you a nice display of what the ground looks like below you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good advancement, I'd say.
Yeah, it was a fun thing to build. And then the weather information that you see when you hit the WX, I can explain a little bit about that.
Oh yes, go on.
The WX, under the WX, tells you that you're actually just in the standard weather radar mode. There's a couple other modes in the real airplane and it depends on the equipment that's actually installed. There are a couple other modes. There's a lightning mode. There's a turbulence mode if you have that equipment.
Okay.
But this is just straight weather radar only, so it just says WX. And underneath that, it's telling you that the tilt angle of the radar is negative 1.5 degrees, and it's an automatic tilt. That will show all the time right now. We don't actually simulate that because the sim doesn't really do radar tilt.
No.
You can't set it. You can only set the cone of it, which is kind of fixed in our case. So
yes.
That's what all that means.
Right, great, thank you. Okay, so we are sort of getting close to our top of descent now. It's probably about, 30 odd miles away, would you say? Something like that?
Yeah, that looks about right.
Talk us through it.
Yeah, so what we want to do first is we want to set our altitude preselector down. In VNAV, the altitude preselector is always respected. So even if you're going to bust a restriction because your altitude preselector is set too high, it will always respect that. So if we look ahead on the legs page a little bit, and we have a little bit of time here, let's just see what our next restriction is on the approach. Oh wow, all the way down to 2,700.
Yeah,
looks like.
yeah.
So let's just set that in the altitude preselector for now, and we'll just assume that we've been cleared down to that altitude.
Okay.
And you'll notice the mode switch from Alt S to Alt, and that indicates that we're not tracking the selected altitude. We are just tracking our current barometric altitude.
Okay, right.
So that's why that mode changes there.
Right.
But all that's left to do now, we've got the altitude dialed in. All we need to do is hit the VNAV button.
Okay.
And you'll see it switch to VALT.
Yes.
So VNAV is not its own mode specifically. It's a combination of VNAV and the other vertical modes in a sense.
Okay.
You can be in VS and also be in VNAV. You can be in FLC and also be in VNAV. And the V in front of those modes indicates that VNAV is active.
Right. Okay.
You'll notice right here that we've got path indicated.
Yes.
Which is telling us that path mode is armed. Path mode is the default for VNAV, and it's going to fly you the calculated VNAV descent path.
Okay. And so the fact that we have path mode, which just popped up, does that mean that it has finished calculating our VNAV path?
It means that you're within, there's a specific distance, I forget exactly how far, but it becomes armed when you're close enough to the TOD that it says, okay, now I know that I'm for sure going to do this, and we're going to go down the VNAV path.
Right, okay. So let's say that ATC cleared us down to 5,000 feet or any lower altitude now before we got to the top of descent. How would we deal with that?
There's a couple of different ways. Because that would be above the restriction that we have, there's something called a vertical direct we could do. If they said now you're cleared direct to to 2700 just from here, you could do a vertical direct. We have that model that would be on the direct page. But since that's a little bit higher, probably what we would do is we would use VS mode and go down probably about 2,000. I would say 2,000 feet per minute downward, and just leave it in VS mode with VNAV on, basically. And so you'd see VVS and you would see minus 2,000, and it would not. You'd sort of descend through the path. So that would be my approach to it, but it's not the only approach.
No. Okay. So sorry. Go Okay. So 2,000 feet per minute is sort of a fairly typical descent rate if you're going to use VS mode.
I think so. It depends on where you are. Obviously, that might be a little bit higher if you were a larger airliner and you're flying a little bit slower, but we're flying relatively quickly, and so that feels like a reasonable range, I think.
Yeah.
And so you see here we've got the VNAV snowflake coming in.
I do.
That gives you your vertical deviation from the calculated path.
Right.
And we've got a TOD indication on the PFD, and it's now flashing, indicating that we are approaching within 10 seconds of the TOD. VPATH went from armed to active, and we're now on the path descending via VNAV.
Right.
We will want to decrease our throttle at this point, though.
Yes, I'm on it. And just this little, I don't even know what it's called, the magenta circle here that was sort of decreasing, I should say, our vertical speed up until we intercepted. What does that tell us?
Colloquially known as the pink donut.
Pink donut, right.
So that tells you the vertical speed that you would need in order to meet the next restriction. So no matter from where you are, as soon as your sort of VNAV data pops up and you start seeing that, it's telling you if you were to descend now, right this very second, that would be the vertical speed you would need in order to hit the next restriction.
Okay, right.
And so one other thing I think I can probably pretty quickly demonstrate here is you'll see it says Alt S again.
Yes.
Because the next altitude selection is the pre-selector altitude. However, if we were to go down low enough, if we were to take that altitude pre-selector and let's just zero it out, for example.
Okay.
And if we zoom in on that, we see it's changed now to Alt V. Yes. And that means that the next level off is actually at a VNAV selected altitude and not your selected altitude. So that lets the pilot know that VNAV is going to level off before you have it selected to.
Okay, that makes sense. And as a general rule in the real world, even if you're following a star which perhaps has multiple altitude restrictions, would you still use the altitude selector to match those restrictions, or would you just set it to the lowest one and let the aircraft fly itself down in VPATH?
That is really up to the pilot.
Okay.
I would say probably the most common procedure I've heard is you would set the pre-selector to whatever ATC has cleared you to next, and then continue to descend via VNAV. And usually you'll be much higher than that. ATC is kind of ahead of you.
Yeah.
So you'll usually be slewing it down before you get to that point or before you get to capture. So that would be my recommendation, I guess.
Sure. And I think final question. We were talking about ATC clearances.
Sure.
And let's just say, for the sake of argument, that ATC had cleared us down to 2,000 feet, which seems very unlikely this far out, but let's just say they had. You said that you might end up going through the VPATH if you're using VS mode. Does that mean that you would, from that point on, just continue to descend at 2,000 feet per minute or what have you, and ignore the VPATH, or would you at some point try and intercept it?
So if you were still in VNAV mode and you hit the VPATH, if you intercepted the VPATH, sort of crossed through it, it's going to bounce you out of your current vertical mode and it's going to switch to path.
Okay.
If you didn't want to do that, you could just turn VNAV off and then just descend, via VS. And then when you get to your level off, you could turn VNAV back on and sort of re-intercept the path if you wanted to do that. But if you were in VS, in VNAV, and you got within the capture range of the path, you're going to go back into path mode.
Okay. And would that be the typical way of doing it? Would you start a gradual descent, then intercept the VPATH and let that take you down to your cleared altitude?
I think it would depend on what those restrictions are.
Okay.
Sometimes those can get particularly shallow depending on the situation, and if ATC wants you to get down faster, that may not be enough. So it's a little bit situational.
Yeah, sure. That makes sense.
And one thing you can check is if you go to the legs page there, you'll notice there's a bunch of angles listed. These are all 3 degrees, which means that it's just going to be a 3-degree flight path angle, the FPA, to the next restriction. However, the ProLine 21 does what's called VNAV path smoothing.
Right.
And VNAV path smoothing will fly you the smoothest possible path through the restrictions at any angle between 1 and 6 degrees. If it's less than 1 degree, you're going to get a level off, and then your next descent segment will start again at 3 degrees until you hit the next restriction. But it kind of builds a number of segments in there depending on how many restrictions exist, and tries and flies you through the best path, basically.
Okay, that's cool.
And that's something that I think that was a 0.10 series edition.
Right. I have noticed a difference, actually. I couldn't put my finger on what, but that must be it, I think. The descents do seem smoother.
It's a lot smoother. I mean, obviously it's a little bit in the name, right? VNAV path smoothing, but we did a bunch of other work there as well to make the VNAV experience a little bit better.
Yeah. One other question.
Sure, absolutely.
Speed during descent. I've just sort of whacked the throttles down and taken my eye off the speed as we were discussing other things. But should you again be trying to keep it as close to the red line as possible? Yeah.
So, a lot of folks that sort of come from airliners, they assume that VNAV is performance-based VNAV and that it has calculated sort of an idle descent path for you. But the plane is really too small for that. The reason that idle descent works in larger planes is because you have all this inertia and you can kind of do this big parabolic descent in idle.
Yeah.
But an idle descent in the CJ4 with such a small light plane is really, really fast.
Yes.
And so therefore the VNAV is not really performance-based. So my recommendation is always, keep the speed up, and then once you start getting close to kind of that 10,000 restriction, then you kind of pull it back.
Sure. Okay.
And under, actually we're coming up on it now. Let's see. We're going to want to keep it under 305 at 28 or 27,844, whatever that magic number is. It's going to switch out of Mach and the red speed tape. So that's the other thing to keep in mind.
Okay, yeah. So is there anything else we should be doing to set up for the approach? Or not yet?
Not really at the moment.
No, okay.
We can sort of, brief it and just make sure we're on the same page and we know exactly what approach we're doing, and that would be the normal procedure.
Yeah.
If you're doing it for real, always go over and grab the chart and go, okay, we're doing this approach and we're coming from this direction and we've gotten the winds and all that kind of stuff.
Sure. Talking of which, since I had to restart my computer so suddenly, I don't have the charts up at all, so I'm glad we had this chat. So I'll bring the chart up on the screen for you to have a little look at, so that you can see what our plans are. So we're going to be following this ILS approach. We're going to be beginning at Inverness. We're going to be heading out away from Inverness on heading 254, and then coming back on ourselves to intercept the inbound radial of 054. That's obviously the final approach course that we'll be following on the localizer.
Perfect. All right, so one thing we might want to do is let's go to plan mode on the MFD there.
Okay.
And if we go to MFD Advance on the FMC, and we kind of zoom in here on the MFD a little bit, and just make sure, we may need to actually take our scale down as well.
Yes, which was this one, wasn't it? Yep, there we are. A bit more.
Yeah, a bit more. And let's just go through the end of the approach here and just make sure that things look kosher.
Okay.
It will sometimes scroll through things that are behind you, so if you just keep on going forward, you'll get to your point. There's probably quite a few that are behind us at this point.
Yeah, here we are. So we're approaching Lagav, then Nesdi, Gussie, and then Inverness.
All right, so yeah, it looks like it's pulling us out there, and then we've got that kind of sharp right turn to C105?
CIA5, I think. Yeah, so I think we're going to be turning left along this one, and then left and left again from the looks of it.
All right, so probably what we'll want to do, those are very sharp. And if you notice on the chart, it kind of gives you more of a large arc to turn, which maybe it's going to be smarter. So I think the way that we'll want to do this is we'll fly out to let's see, is that INS 12?
Yes.
And then we'll go into heading mode along that same heading and kind of give ourselves a little bit of space to intercept the CI05 to FI05 leg and get us situated for a good ILS.
Okay, sounds good. And do we need to tune in the ILS frequency?
We don't.
We don't.
It's going to do it for us.
Awesome. Mm.
Once we get within 31 nautical miles of the runway there, we'll enter the terminal area, which is, again, defined as 31 nautical miles from the threshold. And our sensitivity on the CDI will go from 2 nautical miles to 1 nautical mile. And that will kind of start to set us up for the approach.
Remind me what the CDI is again.
That is the deviation indicator in the middle of the needles there. So CDI is course deviation indicator. That's the bar that scrolls left and right.
Okay, right, I'm with you.
So you'll notice actually we did just enter the terminal area. You'll see term there on the PFD.
Oh yes, yeah.
And we have an FMC message. Messages popped up, and you see at the bottom of the FMC it says "Loc will be tuned."
Oh yes. Check loc tuning. I've never seen that before. Is this a recent addition?
It is, yeah. So we've got the whole nav-to-NAV transfer going here. So this is something that happens with add-on airports. The ILS does not come out of the database. So what has happened here is the FMC said we're in terminal area. It's time to tune the radios. However, it's unable to look it up, and so it's telling you to check the loc tuning yourself.
Okay.
So we'll just want to go to the tune page and put in the localizer on our own.
Right, okay. And I'll just have a check of what it was. 108.5. And we just put that into nav1, do we?
Yep, perfect.
Okay, and we've got it coming up here in... don't know what you call this colour, turquoise, teal, something like that.
Yeah, cyan. Yep.
Cyan, that's right. Yeah. Okay.
So that needle there is colloquially known as the ghost needle.
Right.
And that tells you where your localizer is in reference to view sort of right now. And you'll notice that we are armed for the, this is where the NAV-to-NAV transfer comes in. We're armed for the NAV-to-NAV transfer, which will take us from FMS needles into the localizer needles.
Right.
And you notice that we know that because preset has now changed on the PFD to Loc 1, and you'll see the it's got the tuning information for you there, just to give the pilot a heads up.
Right, okay. Just keeping an eye on my airspeed. I suppose we should start thinking about slowing down.
Yeah, we may want to be pretty slow by the time we hit INS, because that is a rather sharp turn there, and it's probably going to overshoot a little bit. But we'll recapture the leg to INS 12 and then get sorted with heading mode. Okay,
sounds good. I suppose, do we want to go back to PPOS?
Yeah, let's do it.
Lower menu. Right, good. We can just see the final approach course there.
Yep. The other thing is, let's see, you'll notice the cyan diamonds have come up in the lateral and vertical deviation indicators on the top of the PFD.
Yes.
And those are your ILS as well.
Right. Ghost diamonds by chance?
Ghost diamonds.
Yeah, good. Getting my hang around the jargon. My head around the jargon.
Yeah, I think the official name for the ghost needle and the ghost sort of localizer information is the pre-select navigation source.
Okay, right.
Which is somewhat annoying because, you know, the other thing is just the preset navigation source, and so saying both of those things makes it sound like they're nearly identical. So the manuals are a bit confusing when it comes to that, but that's the official name for what it's worth.
Right. So how much did you know about the CJ4 before you started working on it? Were you completely new to the aircraft, or?
Yeah, nothing. I knew nothing about the CJ4 when I started.
Well, you've done a good job of getting up to speed.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
I suppose you have to if you're developing it.
Yeah, we've gotten way deeper into the systems than I ever expected to, but it's become sort of a personal challenge to sort of bring it to that high quality, you know, what you would normally expect from a payware level.
Yeah, for sure. All right, passing 10,000, so I'll bung the landing lights on.
Probably do the old seatbelt sign at this point.
I was just wondering that, yeah.
May I have your attention, please? The captain has turned on the seatbelt sign. Please fasten your seatbelt and shoulder harness at this time. Thank you.
Oh, sim looks great, doesn't it?
Oh, it does. It does. I'm supposed to be concentrating, but I've just got to have a little look out the window.
Oh, yeah.
Should we play the landing briefing?
Yeah, let's do that.
Because we haven't really demonstrated. Well, we may or may not have demonstrated a briefing. I can't remember what with all the takes, but let's have another one if we have.
May I have your attention, please? We will be landing shortly. Please turn off.
Okay, so this is that tight turn.
Snow tables,
Yep.
secure luggage, and loose articles. Return your seat to the upright and outboard position.
You notice it's chopped off a little bit of VNAV path there, so
yes,
you're catching back up.
Yes. And I've got the throttles at idle at the moment. I don't know if that seems sensible.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. And what about our landing speeds? When do we deal with them?
Actually, right now would be a great time.
Yeah. Okay. Talk me through it.
Yeah, if you go to the FMC.
Yeah.
You should be able to go to perf.
Yeah.
And go to approach.
Yeah.
And
fill it in like the other one.
Yeah, exactly.
And I've forgotten everything we did last time, so I remember the temperature's 15. We know QNH is going to be 1013.
Yep.
The wind is 056 at 4. And that's it, isn't it?
That's it. And then we just go next. And we can send those to the PFD.
Oh, so it's exactly the same as when you're setting up for the takeoff.
Yep.
Complete. Awesome.
Yeah, the other thing you'll notice is as we passed over the ILS there, since we're sort of going over the airfield,
yes,
at INS, you got that check loc tuning message again because
yes,
we lost localizer tuning in that cone of confusion there for just a second.
Right. Okay. But it's happy. It's still tuned in and everything, is it? Yes.
Looks like it.
Yeah.
Still
okay,
the ghost needle, the pre-select nav source there is up. It looks good.
Yeah. Yeah. Good.
And probably what we'll want to do here is let's set heading to our current heading, and let's just go into heading mode.
Okay, so we push that in, right, to sync it. Yeah.
That's correct. Yep.
And heading.
And we'll just leave it there for a minute.
Okay.
I think everything else looks pretty good. We're on VNAV path, which is good.
Yeah. Speed's all right, or should we be slowing down a bit more?
I think probably by the time we swing this around and get to a CI 05, we'll maybe knock it back to about 180, but it looks like we're slowly trending in that direction, so I think we're good.
Okay.
And so this is the reason why I switched us to heading mode there, and VNAV is gonna try and catch up, but you'll see the angle is a bit acute, so
yeah.
It was going to give you kind of a very inside turn.
Yes.
So we wanted to avoid that and give ourselves the best chance to get established on this localizer, which is probably what ATC would be doing for you at this point.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I imagine this is one of these approaches which is very rarely flown in full.
That's probably
vectored.
True.
Yeah.
Yep. So I can show us kind of a fun thing to do here.
Yeah, go on.
Go to the legs page.
Yeah.
So right now we've got our current leg is this INS 12 to CI 05.
Yes.
And what we can do is we can switch our leg. This is kind of the intercept leg feature. We can switch our leg ahead one. So if you hit the LSK next to CI 05,
yeah.
now you can drop that onto the INS 12, the cyan there, which is your from, and that's going to make that leg active instead of the one that we're on, and you'll be able to more easily intercept that course.
Okay, and then execute.
Yep.
Okay.
Perfect. And if you'll notice, the PFD, the needles have switched in that direction, which now coincides, obviously with the ILS.
Yes.
So we can start moving that way.
Okay. So we're still going to use heading mode.
Yeah. Let's start turning it around, and we'll start intercepting a course to that CI 05.
Okay. So all the way around, basically, to some sort of intercept heading.
Yep.
Okay.
And since that's pretty short, we can probably intercept. You can imagine that there's a line that extends out from FI05 through CI05.
Yes.
We can probably come at CI05, the kind of imaginary line that goes backwards at a reasonable angle. That's not super steep, but it gets us to where we need to go.
So that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think that looks good.
Okay. Oh, it's disappeared. Oh, I see. I guess the dotted line does disappear once you stop moving it, does it?
The dotted line will disappear when it's within the arc. So outside the arc, you have the dotted line. Inside the arc, it will disappear a couple seconds after you stop moving it.
Right. Okay. So carry on maintaining about 180, did you say? Something like that?
Yeah, I think 180 sounds good.
Okay.
Just want to make sure that this turn doesn't end up too aggressive and we don't overshoot too much there.
Yeah, sure.
All right, so I noticed that we are underneath the glide slope, which is exactly where we want to be.
Yes.
Which is perfect.
Yeah.
And so at this point, we're established on an intercept course to the ILS and to our FMS course.
Yes.
I think, and we're established, we've got the altitude is captured, which is fantastic. We're looking perfect.
Yep.
I think what we can do here is we're ready to arm approach mode.
Okay.
So we just do that by hitting the approach button.
Right. And that's now showing up as white.
Yep, approach loc 1 is white, which is
Yep.
perfect. That's exactly what we want. And once the ghost needle starts to move,
Yes.
if we're in approach mode, that will automatically switch us over. The nav source will switch over to green needles, and we'll start flying the localizer instead of the FMS.
Great.
And that's that nav-to-NAV transfer I was referring to
Yeah.
earlier.
That's a great feature. Because in the last incarnation of this aircraft, I could never quite get the switchover right. So I'm glad it happens automatically now.
Yeah, it's kind of a cool feature of the ProLine system. The other thing that should happen is we should see terminal, that sort of term indicator go to approach.
Okay. Oh, there it goes.
Oh, we're starting to see things. That's perfect. Glide slope is armed. That's good. We can probably start to lower flaps now.
Okay. Flaps 1.
Yep, flaps 1.
It's a beautiful approach, this.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
And what should I be doing throttle and speed-wise here?
I was just about to say, I think we can still keep it at about 180 or so. It
Okay.
seems to be, that should be good still.
And what's
We've got
this? Oh, that's
longer
your
flight.
flap extension speed, is it? The F-35.
That is correct, yep.
Right, okay.
And so at 2700, we should hit the final approach fix almost exactly when the glide slope indicator comes into that 0 range there.
Mm-hmm.
And as you'll see, we did enter the approach area, which is, I
Yes.
believe it is 2 nautical miles from the final approach fix. And when you have approach mode armed,
Yeah.
that changes your needles to 0.3 nautical miles of sensitivity instead of 1.
Gosh,
However,
okay.
in this case, we're on an ILS, so that doesn't exactly apply. But if you were flying a RNAV FMS-based approach,
Yes.
you would add sensitivity.
Yeah. Right, sweaty palm times.
Things look good so far.
Yeah, yeah. I did a slightly dodgy landing into Las Vegas last night, and that threw my confidence a little bit.
It's always a little bit tricky.
Yeah.
The trick to land this is to do a sort of very minimal flare. You can do a little bit of a flare, but it likes to float. The real one will also float if you flare too much. The way to get it to go to the runway is just basically hold that attitude, and it will kind of bring itself down.
Okay.
And we'll go back power to idle as we fly over the threshold as well.
Sure. And when should we start reducing to our approach speed? VREF?
Yeah, I was going to say. I think we can start slowing up now. We'll get those gear down and get down to flaps 2 and
Okay.
kind of do both of those.
So gear down now,
Yep.
and flaps 2 as it passes the F-35 indication, I guess, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
You notice the drag gets pretty significantly higher, so you
Yeah.
do end up sort of getting caught off. At least I do a lot, caught off guard by that
Yeah, I do.
speed drop.
Yeah. Yeah, doesn't take too long to suddenly be stalling, does it, in this? You don't keep an eye on it. So we're going to be maintaining around about this, aren't we now?
Yeah, that looks perfect.
And before we land, we have to disengage the autopilot and the yaw damper. Is that right?
That is correct. Yep.
Okay.
And whenever you would like to disengage, we got a great visual here. It's totally up to you.
I'd like to do it now. Get a little feel for the thing.
Autopilot.
Sure.
Ah, and you have to disengage the autopilot first, from the looks of things.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. This does feel like more than 5 knots of wind, doesn't it?
It does, doesn't it?
And I've been flying the A320 too much because I always forget to trim.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're going to have to get down a little bit there.
Yes.
Yeah, looks good. And then right about now, I'd go power idle.
Okay, that was idle.
And just hold it off just a little bit. And there you go.
Great.
Brakes on. Normally you go spoiler deploy, but it's a little bit hard to manage that without a control surface for it, so I always forget to do it.
I did press the slash key, so hopefully we've got them out. But anyway, we've got loads of runway.
Yeah, for sure. It doesn't take much to land it.
No.
Oh, fantastic.
Thank you. So I think we need to spin it around here. I think we're... Oh no, maybe that's a taxiway on the left. I can't really remember. Is that a taxiway or a roadway? That's a roadway. We won't go down there.
Is it a like a golf cart track?
Could be. Give the passengers their money's worth with a nice fast spin again. Just when they thought it was all over, it's not. I suppose we should retract the flaps.
It's like one of those carnival rides, the ones that pin you to the wall.
Yes. And retract the spoilers.
Yeah, so it looks like we're all cleaned up here. That's good.
Yeah. I think really I need to fly some circuits in this thing just to get used to the takeoffs and landings.
Yeah, they are a little bit tricky for sure.
Mm.
I feel like it still does float a little bit more than it should possibly, but
yeah,
it's so hard to tell. It always just depends on how people have their control surfaces and stuff. And
yeah. I've actually wondered if I should have different sensitivity settings for different aircraft. I think I probably should. It's just a question of if I can be bothered to set them up and remember which is which and that.
and I like the profile system of MSFS, but changing in and out of them is still a little bit cumbersome.
Yeah, it is. We've got a cat cockpit incursion, which isn't helping.
Yeah, I think mine is still asleep on the bed.
Good. Yeah, they've been asleep all afternoon, but they've decided now it's dinner time. Right.
Always the most important time, of course.
Yeah. Turn the old strobes off. Bung it in here, shall we?
Yeah, it looks perfect.
No one needs to watch me taxi around the airport looking for the very best spot. Oh, tell you what isn't the very best spot though, inside another jet.
Ah,
A bit of room.
It'll buff out.
Right. Set the parking brake.
Perfect.
Have a little look outside at my marvellous parking. Remember, I haven't turned the landing lights off, and do that. And yes, what now?
The shutdown procedure is pretty straightforward. So we have our, we've got our brakes on. That's perfect. It looks like we're already cleaned up, so really nothing to do there.
Yeah.
At this point, we can really we can shut the engines down.
Okay.
And normally we would run through the the post-landing checklist and all that stuff, but
yeah,
it's basically the post-landing checklist is turn all the things off effectively. So we can basically just do that.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So stop and stop.
Yep.
And turn all the things off.
Yeah, you get some warnings. You can clear those. You can turn the climate control back to off.
Yeah.
I'm just going to keep on popping
It's
them
like
up.
whack-a-mole, this, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, climate control's off.
There, turn the avionics off now.
Avionics off. Close the stupid logbook thing.
And then battery goes off.
Right, and that's it.
That's it.
Well, Matt, that has been incredibly helpful. Thank you very much indeed.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Is there anything else you want to tell us about before we call this a day?
Nothing that immediately comes to mind. Obviously there are. It's not a bug-free product at the moment. We know that there are definitely little things here and there that people are still running into, and we've got it sort of in this open beta phase. But if you run into things, drop a line on our GitHub or come on to our Discord and bother us, and we're always happy to teach people. We're always happy to take questions. We love the community feedback and the just interacting with the community. One thing that I especially hate a lot of times is you get a lot of developers that kind of get a ivory tower mentality, and that's really not us. We just love that people are enjoying it, and that keeps us going for sure. So I'm super super happy and thrilled to be able to to do this, and hopefully you learned something, and I wasn't blabbing too much.
No, definitely not. You definitely weren't blabbing too much. I learned an awful lot, despite having flown this for a fair old while and thinking I knew what I was doing. I certainly didn't. So it's been very, very helpful, and thanks again. I'll put a link to the Discord server and the GitHub page for Working Title in the video description. And as Matt says, if you have any questions or feedback, go and check those links out. So I think we'll call it a day here. Thanks again, Matt, and thank you all for watching. And I hope to see you again soon here on Filbert Flies. Bye-bye.